Hello everyone, welcome to this week's lesson. Welcome back to my greenhouse. So today we're talking about plant diseases, and I'm going to try and do this in a kind of practical way, showing you all the plant diseases I can find, because they're very, very common. Here's the syllabus. As you can see, there's quite a bit you have to know. You have to know about the stuff we've talked about in previous lessons, and you have to know about insect attacks like aphids, and you have to know what it looks like when plants suffer from some really common deficiencies. So I'm going to show you as many things as I can find that actually are here in my garden, okay? And what I can't find in the garden is going to appear on the notes at the bottom there, okay? So that's the spec. There's lots you have to know. As I say, there's lots of different plant deficiencies and plant diseases. It's all very useful information. Some of it's a bit strange, like the bit where it tells you to look it up in a book. Really, you just Google it. So first section is how do you spot diseases? Okay, how do you spot if a plant is looking ill? Well, as you can see, since the last time you saw my tomato rich greenhouse, we've got a fair bit more growth. Now really this is far too crowded for tomatoes to grow, but they've just grown so well there's not really a lot I can do about it. Now what I would look for in a plant that's sick, I'd look for any discoloration, any spots, any sort of rot, any bugs on the things. Now I'm looking at this little fella right here, okay, this little tomato plant. Now this one was looking a bit sorry for itself, so I repotted it yesterday. Most of the problems in here are coming from the fact that these tomatoes are too close together and they're in pots that are too small for them, because basically I've run out of pots. But what I'm looking at here, okay, and if you can see this here, okay, I've got stuff like this on some of the leaves where we've got a bit of browning on the end of the leaf there. Okay, we've got a bit of browning. If we go to the bottom of some of the leaves down here, this is another one I repotted. We've got a bit of discoloration, look. So that's more yellow than it should be. It's more yellow than green. Right, we've got, what else can I find for you? Ah yes, up here, look. Like that whole branch is not doing so well. Okay, that whole little branch there, which I think probably, yeah, is either just dehydration or lack of nutrients, something like that. Okay, and I'm looking for basically anything that looks a little bit out of the ordinary. So I'm looking for discoloration, I'm looking for spots on the leaves, I'm looking for bugs, I'm looking for holes in the leaves, and anything along those lines. Okay, I'll try and find you a couple of other examples and show you what I mean from different places in the garden. Now, in reality, I'm not the world's best gardener. I'm sort of using my eye and just having a look and deciding what's wrong with the plant. And I may get things wrong various times. Realistically, what I would do if something looks a bit dodgy is I might Google it, I might look it up in a book, but really I'll probably just get rid of that bit of plant and kill it. Now, if you were working somewhere like Kew Gardens that was a little bit more sophisticated in what they were doing, then they might use a variety of other tests. They might send a sample of the plant to the lab, or they might use a thing called monoclonal antibody testing, which we're not going to go into yet. If that plant was particularly exotic or particularly rare, you need to diagnose it, you need to save it, you need to look into more widespread patterns of plant disease, then you might use these techniques. But for the common gardener, it's either cut it off, leave it, or spray it, really. Right, so this here could well be a bit of tobacco mosaic virus, a bit of TMV, or it could just be that this has got dehydrated. All right, but TMV looks very much like this: discoloration, spotting, dead spots on the leaves. Okay, so that's our potential TMV. So I'm trying in here to find you on these roses some rose black spot, but actually I'm not doing too well, because these roses look pretty healthy. So there's something on the back of a rose leaf, that kind of black spotting there, which is kind of what rose black spot looks like. Okay, these ones look pretty healthy, however. Now, rose black spot is a bacterial disease. Unlike TMV, which is a viral disease. So you've got an example of a virus, an example of a bacteria, a couple more bits of spots of discoloration there. But generally these roses are looking pretty healthy, so not too much luck there. Okay, so that's our virus, TMV, and our bacterial disease, rose black spot. And then we've got these horrible little fellas in here. Now this is just a tray of lettuces, small lettuce plants I've largely ignored for a long time. I'm definitely going to bin or burn these ones, because have a look at all these horrible little aphids on here, so-called black fly. So aphids come in different types. You've got black fly, you've got green fly, various things. But essentially what they do, right, is they have very long mouth parts that can stab into the stems and suck the sap out of the plants. Okay, and they are incredibly rapid breeding. Right, they only breed sexually, i.e. with two parents, right, a couple of times in the year. The rest of the time they're all female, and they reproduce asexually. They effectively clone themselves, and they're so fast at this that when an aphid is born by this method, she is already herself pregnant and ready to give birth. So the numbers can increase absolutely exponentially. So this is as I say, I've ignored these lettuces here because I've got other lettuces that I've already taken out of this this tray, and they've got a bit weak and succumbed to a fairly nasty aphid infection. But they are horrible. There's different things you can do with those. You can spray them with an insecticide, right, which I don't tend to like to do on salad leaves, because then you've got to wash them a lot before you can eat them. Or the organic farmer gets some gloves on and runs their fingers along the stems and actually smushes them, right, which I think is a little bit disgusting, so I don't do that either. So really what I'll probably do is just bin this tray, get rid of it, kill them, burn them, something like that, take a blowtorch to it, something like that, to make sure they don't infect any other plants in the area. Okay, and the other fun thing about aphids is that ants actually farm them, because the ants can't get into the sappy, lovely innards of some plants. They literally farm the aphids, so they let the aphids do the work. They protect the aphids, and then they either eat the aphids or eat the sap that comes out of them, so-called honeydew. Okay, so nice example of sort of farming or animal keeping in the insect world. They're very smart, those ants. So that's aphids. Okay, so this is my apple tree. Now this one isn't on the spec, but this has got like a powdery white fungus on it, which, as you can see, these leaves here have all curled up. Down here, these are all curled up and died because of a powdery white fungi. Now, the treatment generally for all these things is just cut the bit off and burn it. Just get rid of it, right? And make sure you disinfect your tools, right? But this apple tree is very young, very new, so I don't want to cut too much off it, so I've been a little bit hesitant with that. Let's check some of these other leaves. Yeah, you're not looking too healthy, are you? Yeah. So this is a very young apple tree. So what I've done to try and get this apple tree to grow is I've taken all but 2 apples off it. It tried to make lots of apples in its first year, and really I'd rather it put its strength into growing its roots. So that's an apple tree. That's a powdery white fungus. And then also over here I've got this, on this pear tree, which again is new, I've got this interesting orange fella here, right, which isn't on your syllabus, but I will treat in the same way. I'll probably spray this, right, with a broad spectrum, you know, fungicide, pesticide, insecticide. This is a very young pear tree, and it's got an orange rust fungus, I believe, on it, right, which is not very nice. And there we go. Okay, so that's some of your diseases, okay, that you can see around the garden. Really common, every garden has them. Most of the time the plants just live with them. But as I say, some of my plants are pretty young here, so I'm going to need to do something about that. And usually the treatment is just cut it off. Just cut the bit off and burn it, right? or you can spray for insects and for fungi if you are so inclined. Some people don't like doing that, especially if it's something they're going to directly eat, because then they've got to wash the plant an awful lot. And obviously what I'm growing is pretty much exclusively for food. Okay, so that's one thing. That's diseases. The other part of this lesson is on deficiencies. Okay, so we're going to talk about deficiencies, and then we'll go into a little bit on how plants actually defend and protect themselves from these diseases, deficiencies. They're effectively their body defences. You've done us, so we'll do plants as well. Okay, so what we're looking for in plants is we're looking for you have to know two types of deficiencies. You have to know nitrogen, what nitrogen deficiency looks like, and you have to know what magnesium deficiency looks like. Okay, nitrogen comes in the form of nitrates, and you get it from your compost and from the soil, from fertilizers, right? And it's the really important component in manufacturing protein. So nitrogen is the only thing plants can't get from photosynthesis. So if you think about photosynthesis, it's carbon dioxide and water, which contains carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So to make protein, they need some nitrogen as well. Okay, and so they get that nitrogen from the soil in the form of nitrates. Okay, and if they don't get those nitrates, then obviously they can't make the amino acids. They can't make the amino acids, they can't make the proteins, and just like you or me, if they don't get the proteins, they can't grow. Okay, so essentially the way you can spot if a plant has got a nitrate deficiency is it stunted? Has it got a tiny amount of growth? Okay, and I'll try and show you an example of that in a moment. The other one is magnesium deficiency. Okay, magnesium deficiency shows up as the plant looking yellow. Right? Reason for that is because magnesium is really important in the centre of chlorophyll. Just like your blood, like in hemoglobin, has got iron in the middle of it. Chlorophyll is a molecule that's made largely from carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and in it, in the middle of it, is this magnesium, which is really important in allowing it to absorb light and do photosynthesis. No magnesium, no chlorophyll, no growth. In fact, you already know what it looks like. If you probably don't know that you do, but you already know what it looks like when a plant doesn't have enough magnesium. So have you ever seen like cabbage boiled and boiled for hours? Okay, like, you know, when you go around to your grand's house for Christmas and she's boiled the Brussels sprouts since November or something, and they've gone that grey colour. That's essentially because the heat has removed the magnesium from the middle of the chlorophyll. Okay, so plants lose their green colour, and the leaves start to look yellow. Okay, and I'll try and show you that as well. So back to tomatoes. So these are some tomato plants. I mean, this is all lovely, healthy tomato growth here. Liking this very much. Lovely, green, healthy. Nothing nasty on that at all. Now, tomatoes do just tend to lose their lower branches. They tend to deliberately remove nutrients because, of course, from the plant's perspective, the things up there are getting way more light, therefore doing way more photosynthesis than the things buried down here. But it illustrates the point, okay? So this leaf here, as you can see, look, right? This leaf here is all yellow. As you can see, all of the green is going in towards the stem. Now this to me suggests the plant's actually removing the magnesium for this and putting it elsewhere, because it's only in a pot that's that big. You know, some of these stems have already been sacrificed. Only in a pot that's that big, not a huge pot. Okay, so it's probably moving a load of its magnesium further up the plant. But that would be what a magnesium deficiency looks like. Okay, now if I can find you another example, until yesterday, this here, oh, big old bee, hello. Oh, look, lovely. There we go, nature in action. So this plant here was in a tiny little pot, which is why it is only that big, whereas some of the ones you can see down here in the bigger pots, okay, are now that big. And I'm going to leave the bee to his work. Okay, here's another plant for you. This one here, these are hops, as in one of the main ingredients for beer making. But as a plant, they climb really fast, really well, and wildlife absolutely loves them. Caterpillars, butterflies absolutely love them. So this is a hop variety called Zenith. but they are hungry. They love their fertilizers. So if I come down here, you can see most of it's really healthy because I've been feeding and feeding and feeding these. If we come down here, you can see I just can't quite keep up. Oh, big spider on this, which is lovely. But that is a leaf that the hot plant's just kind of given up on. You see how easily that came off, because it's out of the light, right? It's not getting enough nitrates. Sorry to any arachnophobes. Ooh. But there you go. Okay, so that's another example of plant. We've also got here some pests which have been eating plant. Well, that's fine, the hops won't mind that. And up here, look, so the caterpillars have been at the leaves, but that's fine, that's kind of what they're here for. We've got a leaf down here that's a little bit magnesium deficient. You can see it's slightly paler than the rest, but generally I'm pretty happy with this. Doing a pretty good job of keeping these fed. It's the same story over here with the potatoes. So this is my potato bed here. So on the top here, look, healthy, lovely healthy green potato growth. A few weeds in there that we don't really want, but you know, what can we do about that? And then if we come all the way down here, look, you can see again, same thing. Now I think this is, the plant is doing this rather than actually being lacking in magnesium or nitrates. The plant is removing that because it's in constant shade. That's the colour you get when the chlorophyll starts to disappear. Now interestingly, over in the back here, these, you might have grown these at home, these are runner beans, okay, and they, as you can see, look absolutely spot on. Reason for that is you don't actually need to fertilise beans because they make their own fertiliser. Okay, they've got some special stuff going on in the roots which allows them to manufacture nitrates from the air. For more on that, you'll have to do the A level. Okay, so that is how you spot a plant disease, what kinds of diseases there can be, what nutrient deficiencies look like. Now, of course, you don't just succumb to pathogens. You've got an immune system, you've got body defences, and so do the plants. Okay, they are perfectly capable of defending themselves. And most of the time with this, you can obsess too much about diseases and deficiencies and all that kind of stuff. But plants can look after themselves pretty much. They've been co-evolving with fungi and insects and all sorts of things for millions and millions of years, and actually they depend on them for their survival. Okay, so there's a couple of things you need to know that plants do that's for protection. You've got physical defences like thorns and various other things. You've got thick things like cuticles. So they've got thick waxy cuticles. I'll show you some of those in a moment. They've got cellulose cell walls. Cellulose is hard, as you already know about cellulose, and that stops bacteria things getting in. And you've also got bark on trees. Now bark is a protective layer that's dead effectively, and it stops any sort of pathogen or anything getting in, or insect getting in to the actual living part of the plant. Okay? So here we've got two quite different plants right next to each other. We've got, at one end, we've got the gooseberries. So these are my gooseberries. Now, if we have a little rummage underneath some of the branches, we should actually be able to find some gooseberries. Aha, yeah, there we go. If you can see those, there they are. There's my gooseberries. Okay, so that's a gooseberry bush. And then next to it here, it's obviously flowered now and has finished flowering. This is a lilac tree. Okay, this is my lilac tree. And they have quite different defences. So both types of leaves, right, the lilac and the gooseberry, got the same sort of structure. They've got this waxy cuticle, but on the lilac it's much thicker. And this waxy layer protects and prevents bacteria and other pathogens from getting in. And the thicker that waxy layer, the more they're protected. Okay, so you see infections on things like tomatoes and various other plants, much more new growth, much more than you do on these thick established ones. Okay, and down here, all right, as you can see, the gooseberry's got much thinner waxy cuticle, but it's still got one on there. All of these leaves have cellular cell walls because they're plants. That's how plants are made. That cellulose prevents things from getting in. You can see a picture, hopefully, just in the other window. There's that. And the gooseberry, of course, which you'll know if you've ever tried to harvest gooseberries, tries to protect its fruit with these horrible spikes. Okay, and these nasty looking little spikes down here. So if you ever tried to harvest gooseberries, you know how spiky they are. Okay, and that is a form of mechanical defence against grazing, against herbivores coming along, trying to eat the plant or trying to take away their fruit. Other plants have got poisons, which help defend them from would-be consumers. Some of those poisons are chemically poisonous, and some of them are glue. So things like common milkweed glues up the caterpillars that's trying to eat it, glues up its mouth parts and stops them from consuming the leaf. Okay, one other thing to show you, of course, while we're here. All right, this is our lilac tree. The bark on it, you see the bark is a dead layer, right? That is obviously a protective layer, but I've got my Stanley knife with me. So if I just do a little bit of this, if I just cut through like that, then underneath you should be able to see that's where the living tissue is. Now I don't recommend doing that to all your plants, okay, but I'm pretty confident in doing that because this is a fairly established and old tree, so it's not going to do too much damage. But the bark there is a protective layer, okay, and it's one of the reasons why you probably shouldn't prune trees in the summer, because you let bacteria into the open wounds. So to recap, we've got our physical defences, which are our cuticles, our cellular cell walls and our bark, as we've discussed. We've got our mechanical defences, like our thorns. Some leaves can also curl up when you touch them, and some leaves also and flowers mimic other plants, mimic other animals to make themselves look unappetising. And then you've got chemical defences, things like some plants producing antibacterial chemicals, such as the eucalyptus pictured there, tea tree in Australia as well. And then in the UK, you've got poisonous plants like foxgloves and deadly nightshade that are pictured there, that produce a poison very, very deadly to any animal that might eat it. So they end up defending themselves that way. So clearly there's all sorts of other ways that plants can defend themselves as well. You've got things like plants that produce really sticky sap that can gum up the mouth parts of caterpillars when they're trying to eat them, gluey resins and so on and so forth. So there's loads of different ways that plants can protect themselves. Okay, so what I want you to do, because that's a very content heavy lesson, is to make sure you've noted down in your book all of the plant diseases that you have to know that are on your syllabus, how you'd spot them, right? What you do to test for them, how you would also know if a plant has got any sort of deficiency of nitrogen or magnesium, and then the ways that the plant defend themselves. Okay, now if I can make a recommendation to you, now this was a David Attenborough documentary that came out in 1995. Now for reference, I was in year 7 in 1995, and it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, because plants can look quite boring. Obviously you've got amazing video technology now, but this Private Life of Plants documentary was the first one that ever showed in time lapse how dynamic and incredible different the lives of plants are, how they work just like animals. They compete with each other, they fight with each other, they try and trick and hide from each other, and all they use each other to climb over, all that kind of stuff. It's an absolutely still a brilliant documentary to watch. Okay, so I would suggest David Attenborough's The Private Life of Plants if you're interested in some of the more detailed sort of ideas behind how plants live and how they survive with the rest of the environment. Okay, and I'll see you next week.